All right, Sarah. So everybody gets this first question. All right, the red light just came on. Are you nervous? Do you want to back out? It's okay if you do. Or
No, I'm
you okay?
ready.
You're good. All
I'm
right.
ready.
All right. Let's jump into it. Good. Well, awesome. Why don't you do me a favor? Why don't you introduce yourself to my listeners and tell me what you work on?
Sure. So my name's Sarah Brandow. I am a co-founder and chief nutritionist of VitaBowl. So we create plant-based superfood bowls and now plant-forward meals as well that are evidence-based to help people to manage and in some cases even reverse disease. Mhm.
Wow. So that's a lot in a bowl. Let's kind of break that down a little bit
Sure.
for people who have no visual.
It
Now I've
really,
obviously seen it, so I know what you're talking about. But let's break
sure.
that down. What does Vitable actually mean? Like talk to us how kind of describe this if you can for our listeners.
Sure. So my background, my master's degree, I have a master's of science in nutrition. And so I've always had a passion for creating food that is nutritious and also very delicious. And VitaBowl was the opportunity for me to pair with one of the greatest chefs in the world, Dominique Kren, America's first three-star female Michelin chef. And so she got
Nice.
to put her flair on the healthy bowls. And I got to use my knowledge of disease, basically reversal and management through evidence-based food protocols and incorporate that into our meal. So what does that mean? For example, if we know that certain ways of eating help to manage diabetes, help to reduce risk of heart attack and stroke, some of the top
Hmm.
killers in the United States can actually be managed through diet. So I took all of this evidence, all of the published literature on what is working to help people to improve their health outcomes, put it into the bowls, and then she put her chef's flair to make them delicious.
That's awesome. Now, when you're mentioning bowl, does this mean like
Mhm.
this would be like a meal kit that's like sent to you, maybe similar like a Blue Apron or something along those lines? Is that what we're talking about?
It's an already prepared meal. So you can just put it in a
Oh,
pan and
nice.
heat it up. Yes, it's already prepared. The reality is that there's so many individuals who would love to eat healthier. And even if everything's given to them in a perfectly packaged box, sometimes it still feels like a little bit too much work, a little bit too much stress. Sometimes the time
Sure.
isn't there if you're still cooking things. So we eliminated that problem. You just have to put it in a pan and heat it up.
Wow, that's awesome. So it feels like this is a pretty big undertaking to get this off the ground in terms of having to have a lot of parts come together. Kind of how did you personally kind of get involved in this? I know you met the chef that we were just talking about, but just where is kind of the origin of this idea and how does it kind of all come together? It feels like a lot of things had to happen for this to come together.
Yes. So Charles, who is the CEO and founder of VitaBowl, or he was our CEO, but
Mhm.
he was the founder, and he had this
Okay.
vision. He had family members who were diagnosed with diabetes, and he has a young son, and he wanted to create a better food system for his family and for the people around to make it more accessible, to make it affordable, to make it
Yeah.
easy. And so he partnered with Miko Lorenzo, our other co-founder, who has an amazing background in food and culinary as well. And they had this idea and they brought in a few chefs in the beginning and they were having trouble fusing the healthy with the delicious. It was kind of one or the
Sure.
other. It wasn't really working. And so that was when Charles actually reached out to me. We were in some of the same circles through people that I had worked with as a nutritionist in California and helped them to fix up their diet and eat healthier. And so, yeah, we kind of knew each other in the online sphere. And he said, "Hey, I'm doing this project and we're building something amazing. Can you see yourself maybe being a part of it? Did you want to apply?" And so from there, we just discussed, how I could help, how we could have evidence-based meals, how we could fuse a nutritionist and a chef and create something
Sure.
really special. And so that's how Vitable was born. The four of us, Miko, Charles, Dominique, and myself, we came together in early 2020. I joined the team. So 4 years now,
Cool.
and we made it happen.
That's awesome. What is like a starting point? Is it a recipe? Is it an idea? Is it a trend that you're like, hey, I think people are going to this? Is it food in season? And then how do you kind of navigate that? I'm in Detroit. Like how do you navigate then? Okay, now what happens? Like after you put all this stuff together.
So we started off only in California. So it was produce that was
Mhm.
local, that was seasonal. We had our own kitchens. The
Right.
food was being made there. We actually started off in the Twitter building in San Francisco, but obviously in early 2020, we know what happened. And a lot of businesses had plans that kind of got thrown awry. And it actually ended up
Yeah.
working out beautifully for us because other opportunities opened up for hospitals to carry our food. So we're in, for example, UCLA
Mm.
Health, Cedar Sinai. So we
Oh,
had these
nice.
hospital partners instead. So we pivoted from office buildings to targeting actually the people who needed it the most, which was a lifelong dream of mine. To have my food
Yeah.
in hospitals. I hope one day for patients as well, but for now, at least you can buy it in the calf. So We
Yeah.
have now partnered with national co-packer, so you can order VitaBowl in most states, which is wonderful. So we send the recipes over, the parameters, and they have their team of trained chefs who are able to make it to the VitaBowl standard.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, let's just maybe focus on you. Where is your first step in kind of this team of four?
Yeah.
Like, where do you kind of come in? Where do you step out? Like, kind of, it's almost like a little four-headed monster here. So how do you kind of come and go in this whole idea?
Well, luckily, we all have our own very clearly defined roles. And so we never had issues with that. Everyone knew what their lane was, and we stayed in it, and we worked really well. So my role was, hey, we want to make a bunch of bowls, start from scratch. We want them to be delicious and nutritious. So I said, okay, well, this is what the evidence says for diabetes management, for example, is where we started. So I created bowls that fit those parameters. So I said, okay, we're going to do it low oil or no oil. We're going to use these whole foods. We're going to have this much fiber. We're going to have this much vitamin C. We're going to have this much iodine from seaweed in this one bowl to create a perfect week of eating. So I put the nutritionist spin on it, and I basically calculated all of the macros and, most importantly, the micros. Everyone forgets the micronutrients, but those are extremely important. And we created this beautiful week of eating. And then from there, Dominique comes in and is like, okay, let's change this up. Let's add this, let's change the pepper for this. Let's change this spice, add that spice. And that was how it began. And then we got to expand and say, okay, what are more conditions we want to target, or what are more types of meals that we want to make?
Oh, that's intriguing. Yeah. So you really have as somebody who likes to cook, and I'll be cooking this weekend here, a whole bunch of food. It would be very intriguing on my end if a nutritionist was just like, hey, you got to like almost like a parameter, like a box to be in, and be like, no. I got to put this glaze all over the ham. And it's, and so it definitely feels like that's got to be an interesting tug and pull relationship, obviously all for the good, but man, that would be intriguing. I never really thought about it this way as I was looking at you guys' stuff. It's interesting.
I'm not a chef's favorite. Chefs want to add butter, more salt, more this, more that. And I'm like, no, we're going to make this nutrient dense and plant predominant as well. We know that plant predominant eating patterns are incredible for longevity, for cellular health, for disease reversal. And so, or plant forward is another term used to describe these patterns of eating. And so that was kind of the focus. But for a lot of people, that's not the most common way of eating, and that's not, the most enjoyable way of eating if they're not used to it. So it was also about showing people, hey, you can have plant foods and they can be absolutely delicious, and you can feel amazing from eating this way.
Right. Wow. That's intriguing. Yeah, it was. Yeah, your relationship and this, it's an interesting one. That again, I'm just thinking about as somebody who cooks a lot of food over here. So I think you just mentioned this, and are these like weekly, like the meals planned out all week, or is it like one recipe kind of all week? You're going to eat this one thing, or is it just these one-off meals? And how does that kind of fit into maybe somebody who has diabetes who is kind of taking this as a potential solution or something to start working on? How is it fitting into like their already daily life of them eating, whatever they want at night, or how do you kind of fit into that?
So initially we started off with just 5 SKUs, 5 different dishes, because we were B2B. So we were selling to businesses where we were in, for example, the cafeterias, we were in different cafes, quick service places. And then we added 5 more the first 5 were designed to be eaten cold, but they weren't a salad. They had things in there that, you could eat at room temperature that were really dense and really delicious. We had some black rice noodles. We had some quinoa. So it didn't feel like you were just eating leaves. It was very nutrient dense, and we had different flavors too. We had like a delicious Latin inspired bowl with pulled jackfruit and some black beans and a jalapeno cream, and it was really fabulous. And then, we added 5 more. And then we added our juices, we added our bites, which were refined sugar-free snacks. So the bites are just, some nuts, some seeds, some dates, some protein powder. So we added those in there. And then when we were able to partner with a co-packer, we were able to expand massively. So now people can actually plan out a full week of eating. So it can include their snacks, it can include their meals, or they can just order a few things just to have for lunch, just to have for breakfast. People can choose actually which plan is going to fit best with their life. So there's a lot of flexibility. And what we're working towards now with our crowdfund campaign is insurance coverage to help people to actually acquire these evidence-based meals that have been designed to follow the scientific recommendation on managing and reversing disease. And they won't have to pay for it. It will be covered as part of their insurance plan. So that's the next step.
Wow. Yeah, that would be fantastic. As for some of my listeners who I've been doing a lot of podcasting, and I went through my dad passed away, diabetes, and just did not care about anything. I don't think my dad ate one green thing his entire life. Like, and it was like a proud moment. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, it's just, so how do you kind of somewhat, gently talk about, yes, this could potentially help, the fuel you put in you is going to make you feel better, right? Like, we could reverse what's happening. There's so many people, probably a little bit of an older generation, that think this way, my mom included, who's a listener of this, like, how do you kind of navigate those conversations around like understanding the importance of good food and nutrition and just how do you kind of overcome that barrier? Probably somebody from like your vantage point as a nutritionist, like how do you beat that into somebody's brain who just won't hear it?
Well, I also lead the nutrition department for BioAccelerator. They're a world-leading stem cell company. And so a huge part of the research that I do is on nutrition and cellular health, how to improve outcomes, how to improve longevity, how to strengthen the mitochondria of your cells and cellular function, which translates to the rest of your life being more vibrant. You're able to thrive. You're able to have good cognitive function. So for me, as someone with a nutrition science background, I kind of have my bundle of research that I can pull from to share different studies that show that certain dietary patterns are very important for longevity and for mitigating disease risk. But also, I think that it's very clear people are starting to see that lifespan and health span are becoming separated. They're not the same. And so all the work I do is focused on telling people, yes, maybe you can live longer on a ton of medications with poor quality of life, with a higher risk of stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, or you can choose to expand your health span, where that's going to require you to plan a little more carefully, move your body a little bit more. One of the hardest things for me to hear is people being like, oh, well, I'd rather just die sooner and enjoy my life. Oh, well, I don't need those extra 10 years. And I think there's this belief that, you'll just pass away gently a little bit sooner, when the reality is, if you don't take care of yourself for your entire life for decades, there can be a lot of suffering at the end of life. Your health span can be significantly shrunk, and that doesn't mean your lifespan will be. We have a lot of technology to keep people alive, but not to keep people thriving. To thrive, that's up to you.
Yeah, that's you preach to the choir. My dad was 10 years. I mean, it was just like 10 years of suffering of just like bad health, in and out of hospitals, kidney problems. I mean, just everything. So yeah, it really is. It's that sort of quality of life. How much do you, maybe projecting a little bit, how much do you feel like you are actually being pushed against the entire, like, say, U.S. culture of, big box retail and, eat more and big portions and, just basically kind of how we look at food right now? How much do you feel like you are actually fighting that? Like that, like that's your actual battle, is just to change ideas from the 60s and the 70s and, don't eat fat, do this. And just like actually this big marketing plan that really was for a lot of our time. How much do you feel like you're fighting that day to day?
I feel like that is the fight of my life every day, whether I'm talking to clinic patients, right, who didn't know a lot of stuff. We have this trust, right? We want to trust, okay, the government agencies are obviously put in place to keep the food system safe. And, the pharmaceutical regulation is obviously making sure that all pharmaceuticals are safe, even though about 1/3 of them end up being recalled. So we put all this trust in these people who are being paid with tax dollars to keep us safe. And sometimes it can be a very, very shocking reality when you realize that this is a very money-driven system. This is a very profit-driven system, and no one is coming to save us. And so it breaks my heart. I want better for humanity. I want better for the average person. I want people to feel empowered to make better choices and not have to choose between spending a ton of money and their health outcomes. It shouldn't be that way, and it's heartbreaking. But the only way to change the system, unfortunately, is to support the companies, the farmers, the people who are doing it right, and to not support these companies. But they made it hard. They put monosodium glutamate in fast food to make it super addictive, all kinds of artificial flavors and all these things to make people very addicted, altering the human microbiome as well with these foods and with pharmaceuticals, and making you crave more of these things that are not in your best interest. So it is a very big battle, but it's also not an all or nothing battle. If you make a 30% change, that's 30%. That's massive. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. And maybe after that 30%, you've got room for 5 more. Maybe you don't, but any
Yeah.
change you can make incrementally will have a ripple effect that will extend your health span and can really help enhance the rest of your life.
And are you, from your vantage point, are you seeing a change from, let's just say, my parents' generation to maybe our generation to younger? Are you seeing that conversation just get easier because we're being more aware, or we have more understanding of food, or we have more understanding of cravings and just lifestyles? Are you seeing those conversations getting a little bit easier at all?
Yes, there is a massive generational difference there with not only an understanding of the food system, but almost the other way where young people are like, yeah, everyone is trying to screw us. The government, the food companies, like they don't trust anyone and nothing surprises them. Versus the older generation who are like, well, no, we have rules in place and we have standards in place that are there to keep us safe. They wouldn't sell us something that's unsafe. There can't be that many antibiotics in a chicken breast. No, that wouldn't happen. So it is getting easier. But on the flip side of that now, it's almost like health and wellness and nutrition are being so overcomplicated by all of these voices online saying, do this, do that, or podcasts that go into extensive detail about this protocol, that protocol, 800 supplements.
Yeah.
And people get overwhelmed by this. And so I also want to just bring everyone back to the basics and not have information overwhelm. Eat a clean diet, real food, mostly plants, move your body, take some time to breathe and be grounded. Don't over caffeinate yourself. Don't drink a lot of alcohol. And you're already doing better than almost everybody in the United States. So, before you have your crazy sleep protocol with 800 supplements and this and that, did you move your body enough during the day to sleep well at night? Let's start with that. Do you have enough magnesium in your diet from food? Can we start with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how much do you see a difference between other countries? We're kind of, I think, kind of broadly talking mostly US based.
Yeah.
Is this something that you even see VitaBowl going into other countries, or is it really not another other country issue? I've got a couple friends in like Honduras, and the way they eat is completely different than us, right? Like, so like, how do you, are you seeing this as a mostly US problem, or is it a global problem that you're really addressing?
Well, I'm Canadian. It's definitely a Canadian problem as well. So I would love to see VitaBowl in Canada in the future. It's different problems in different places. So certainly in Europe, for example, they do have a lot of the same diseases, but not to the same prevalence. And also it is much more affordable there to buy organic produce, to buy fruit, to buy vegetables. Government subsidies in the United States and Canada tend to mostly go to animal products or the grains required to feed the animals. There is no big broccoli who's advocating to get cheaper broccoli prices for people, cheaper blueberries. Well, I want a big blueberry. Everyone should be eating more wild organic blueberries. And that's not a thing. So in different countries, it's worse. So for example, and I live in Mexico. So in Latin America, there's less of a fast food culture for sure. Like where I live, there isn't a McDonald's here. I think there's a Burger King actually, but it's not a big fast food culture. But the accessibility of food, it's a lot of GMO corn tortillas with meat that is maybe not the best quality, and a lot of, worst of all, some of the most horrific hydrogenated oils that could probably power a car. So there's other problems here where it's a little bit different, and it's also about but however, fresh fruit and vegetables are way more a part of the culture here. There's fruit stands everywhere where people can go and buy things off the side of the road. I'll be driving down the road, someone's selling pineapple at the bottom of his truck, and I'm like, oh, nice, a pineapple. I'm going to get one of those. Yeah. And you see people engaging in that culture of buying off the neighbors, buying local fresh fruit and veg a lot more, which is beautiful.
Right. Yeah. How much, and I didn't see this much in my research about VitaBowl, but one of the things that has been a pain point is I've got young kids. I got a 12 and a 10-year-old, and something that we have ultimately bitched about a ton is they're forced to eat in like 17 minutes, right? At school, like it's a school thing, like just boom, eat as fast as possible and get out, right? So it's kind of created this like consumerism of like go 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 go, don't even think about what you ate, just move on to the next thing. How much do you, and I think I've heard that, I've got a really good friend who's a nutritionist, and she complains about this a lot as well. How much do you see like VitaBowl, and as you're maybe putting a meal together, going, no, you're supposed to sit down, enjoy this, like, enjoy the flavors. This is not a, boom, you're in and out in 4 minutes, and you don't even know if you're full or not. Like, how, do you think about that at all as you're navigating recipes, nutrition, all that sort of stuff? Is the actual experience of eating it sometimes with your eyes over I know that's a big thing too, is like our eyes see it first sometimes, right? Like, so how do you think and navigate that, and just, again, how fast we have to consume meals here, and how we don't sit down and just enjoy, right? Just enjoy the food.
You won't have a podcast about my thoughts on the school system, but we can go in a whole other direction.
I could go in that one too, because
Yeah.
we are blown away at it over here. And I was like, what are they eating? It's crazy. Yeah. So
It's crazy. And also just the way you shape the developing human mind, right? The curiosity, that there's so many ways where people are confined to a box, where entrepreneurship isn't taught, where individual thought isn't taught. You just have to repeat what you're told. And so there's many elements to that where, of course, it's an imperfect system. And that's where the parents really have to create that individualism and that higher intelligence in their children, to listen to their bodies, to honor their bodies. And with food, this is a huge struggle as a nutritionist. It doesn't matter how healthy your food is. If you are skipping the mechanical stage of digestion, the chewing, the mastication, it doesn't matter how healthy it is. Your gut bacteria are microscopic. We don't break down the fibers, right? The bacteria break them down. They produce the enzymes. And so that is how we actually get a lot of nutrients from the food. These little bacteria, if you're just swallowing your food whole, they're like trying to pick away at it. You're making their job really hard, which means your ability to extract nutrients and also your digestive energy, that's going to shift in a way that is not favorable. So we actually do need to teach children how to chew and savor and enjoy their food, especially with the foods that we're creating at VitaBowl that are plant predominant. You have to chew those foods. It's really important. You can't swallow them whole. And that also changes the way your jawline looks as an adult. If you haven't been chewing for most of your life, if you swallow, that's not, we're supposed to have like defined jaws. We're supposed to be chewing our food and we're supposed to be enjoying it as well and having this consciousness. And it goes into so many layers of just being conscious of what goes into our body, taking a moment of rest before we eat, because we also shouldn't be eating in sympathetic mode. With our sympathetic nervous system activated, your digestion is not what you want at that time. You want to be in parasympathetic mode, resting, digesting, relaxing. So if you're at work, you're in fight or flight, you have a lot of stress, don't just sit down and start shoveling food into your mouth. Stop, do some box breathing, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, and just take 2 minutes. Everyone has 2 minutes. But it does have to start with children, because it is so much easier to teach these habits than to undo all these habits. And so I don't know that I have a solution for the school system, for the way things are structured and the time limits people are on. It's a matter of, I think, really doing research and choosing the school, the education that is going to be best for your child. And not everyone has that luxury. So also understanding the privilege behind that and fighting for change at the state level, where maybe different things are introduced to allow children to have more time, to have more support. And of course, to change the quality of the food being fed to children. That's a huge part of the mission as well. And that's something that we're trying with VitaBowl. We got in the hospitals. It was a huge feat. We're super thrilled.
Sure.
And next, we want to be able to bring this food to children as well.
Yeah. When you're, again, approaching from your vantage point, and you're thinking about just where food is in, let's say, the next 10 years, from, what is happening with like the Beyond Meats, and, just as you're watching kind of food evolve, right? Where are we in 10 years in your mind? Like, and then maybe how do you see like a VitaBowl type of company fitting into that next 10-year evolution of food?
I think that the food system is going to have more of this chasm, a huge divide, where there's going to be foods that are very, very expensive and very nutrient dense. And we're going to see a huge economic disparity there as well, where people are going to be feeling the need to spend more money in order to stay healthy than the people who just think it's all hopeless anyways, and inflation's getting crazy and groceries are too expensive, so they're going to go for whatever is cheapest. And then there's going to be a small subset in the middle of people, because you can eat healthy for really cheap, but you can't also do it for very fast, very convenient. You have to choose somewhere. So you can make amazing food from home. You can meal prep. You can put things in the freezer, but it requires that time. And so somewhere there's going to be a sacrifice. Either you're sacrificing your finances, some of your time, or your health. And we're going to see this divide kind of where people are going to go in different directions. And I think society, we're going to have a lot of people get a lot healthier than previous generations, because this knowledge is available, because we have an international food system. We can get food from all over the world. We have access to so much tropical fruit in the winter. It's crazy, but And that's
Yeah.
also showing people, okay, maybe there's some value in farmers markets. This didn't travel very far. Maybe I can take my children to
Yeah.
farmers markets and teach them why we buy local and make the changes there.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, it's going to become, for people who don't have the time or the motivation, very hard to be healthy. And so what I see for VitaBowl is the ability to bridge this gap, because our meals are not expensive, especially if someone's ordering them on a plan. And so we want to basically be able to bring the cost down even lower through insurance coverage. The more people who order, of course, right? We get to order more in bulk of our raw ingredients and make the cost make even more sense. So I see us being able to bridge this gap for people where it's not expensive, it doesn't take any time, and we want to create this world where people aren't making these really, really hard choices.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It really does seem like it's achievable. I wonder how much mental health and economics are going to play into what you're describing over these next 10 years. Again, family of 4 here. We live with a farmer's market all right downtown. So we try, but it is weird how much it's shifted just for myself of like, oh, you eat tomatoes now because it's tomato season, right? But this idea that tomatoes are here and it's December, right? Like, so there is this, I don't know. It does feel like I want to get back to, I remember my grandma had a garden. So we were always having fresh of whatever was, what could be grown right now or what was in season. How does VitaBowl kind of apply that to, like, again, I'm in Detroit. I know you started in California, but like, hey, it is in season there, and we sourced it locally so that you are applying some of these principles that we're talking about, in a very, very large and dense region with lots of different things happening, or is it just like, hey, this is what we want right now. This is our SKU. You kind of mentioned that word, like, this is our SKU for right now. And yeah, you're eating something that was grown in California, but I'm in Detroit, or is it something that you're just like, hey, it's okay. You're at least getting good nutrients and it's a healthy meal. Or do you try to apply these kind of better principles as you're approaching it?
So different markets have different meals. So actually what's available in Detroit might not be what's available in California. Sometimes there's some overlap. Obviously, a lot of produce in the United States as well does come from Mexico. So some things are available all year round. But there are different SKUs in different places. So you'll be able to order different dishes. And then when you travel, if you want to try in a different state, you might be able to get some different things there as well. So it's a combination of both. We do have some things that are available year round that we're able to source from California year round. Or there's a lot of good quality organic farms in Mexico as well. And then there's the things that change. In California in the fall, I had a lot of fun making menus with squashes. And, for a while we had some soups and stuff as part of our lineup, and we're hoping to bring those back again soon. And that's something that I'm working on for as we build toward this insurance coverage for the elderly. Being able to have more foods so we're going to see even more seasonal stuff as I incorporate that into pureed foods and soups and, some really healthy puddings for desserts that I'm going to make with some raw cacao and some dates. And so we're moving even more in that direction now as we're going to be catering to other individuals who will be part of the insurance coverage programs.
That's cool. Let's kind of go back, maybe just focus on you for a second. How did you get into this? Where is your kind of starting point? Not for VitaBowl, but just thinking about nutrition. Like, was it your parents or grandparents? Like, where did you kind of get inspired to take this on as a career?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I had a family who always prioritized healthy eating. Probably not to the degree that I do now, but I mean, with the information available at the time, they did really well. There was no soda, no chips, no refined sugar in my house growing up. My parents cooked meals themselves. We were not eating frozen foods and fast food. That was like a treat, a very rare treat. Yeah. So luckily,
was it in Canada?
Yes.
In Canada, though?
In Canada.
Where, like a city or like rural? Like, how did you grow up?
I grew up in northern Ontario, Canada, so about an 8-hour drive from Toronto. So cold winters, lots of snow, and beautiful summers, lots of trees, and just a big Italian community there. So a big love of food and sharing meals. And I think that's where I developed this passion for food as a medium to bring people together, which later turned into a medium to also hopefully heal people as well.
How much do you think culture, I mean, we kind of you just mentioned, like, how much do you think culture matters into all this? How your upbringing, your Sunday big meals or whatever it is, how does that play into all this?
Well, if your culture involves a lot of foods that are not so healthy, it can be an exciting opportunity. That was something that I did, whereas I started finding healthier versions of this. Okay, how do I make this with cleaner ingredients, with more plant-based ingredients, and share that with family members and have people try it and realize, okay, I can still enjoy things, but I can do it a little bit better for my cellular health. So that was a huge part of the transition in the beginning. And for me as well, I decided to make some radical changes to my diet and to my life when I was 20 years old. And I still wanted to enjoy food. I was a big foodie and I wanted to eat delicious things. And so I was trying to find versions of those things that I could make myself. And that was the first time I ever started really cooking, like properly my own food, not just assembling some stuff. And it was an amazing culinary journey for me as well, because I learned that, hey, I have this thing that I like doing and maybe I'm pretty good at it. I started doing raw foods as well, experimenting with raw foods in the dehydrator, like raw cookies, raw crackers, things that weren't even cooked, and see what kind of dips and spreads I could make. And I turned that into teaching classes. But all of this unfolded because I made a decision to completely actually remove animal products from my diet when I was 20 years old. And at the time, I was actually studying to be an archaeologist. I was going to Italy to do my field school. I was studying in Canada. So my life took a totally different path when I realized, okay, if I'm going to eat this way, I don't know anything about nutrition. I need to make sure that I don't die. So how do I do this? And then what happened was, it wasn't this quick, immediate thing. I think nowadays when people make dietary changes or health changes, they're waking up every morning being like, do I have abs yet? Is my whatever gone yet? Do I feel perfect? Whereas for me, I had no expectation. I was like, oh, I just got to stay alive. So how do I do this? I have to learn about magnesium and zinc and how much protein I need and what's a carb. And I got really healthy by accident. I noticed about 6 months later, I was like, oh, it's winter now and my pants are too big. And I actually go to yoga every morning at 8 a.m. I used to go to the 4 p.m. class. Or wow, I actually make my 8 a.m. lectures and I'm alert and I remember everything. And it was like health just fell on my lap by accident. I didn't need caffeine anymore. I had a better memory. I needed less sleep. And I realized, wait a second, it's the food. This is accessible to everybody. So then I started studying nutrition obsessively, trying to understand. And at that time, I was still eating, I would still consider that not the best diet. You know, a lot of noodles, a lot of plant-based takeout, let's say, a lot of processed veggie burgers that I would never eat anymore. And I still improved my health that much. So that's when I realized, okay, wow, this is something that I need to understand. This is something that I need to share with people. And that's when I ended up completely shifting my focus in my studies. And I ended up changing my whole life. And then next thing I knew it, I moved to London to pursue a master's degree in nutrition, and it all unfolded from there.
That's awesome. You know, I from about my 21 to about 30, I was a vegetarian, and I actually got bigger than I wanted to, because I was eating veggie burgers and carbs, and you know, so again, it was just like, oh, I'll do this because I love animals and I don't want to do this. And it felt like I felt the worst, you know, out of all that. And eventually I was like, you know what, I got to go back and eat more organic. And now we source, you know, our meat from our farmer's market here. But like, I remember just, you know, again, picking something in my brain and not really doing it the right way, you know? And it sounds like you're talking about like, yeah, you got to, there still is a right way to do this to get all the nutrients that you actually need.
It's extremely important. And I've spent a lot of time with people who eat plant-based, and they're very passionate about the cause from the animal rights perspective, which of course, animal abuse in the factory farming system is one of the major horrors on our planet right now. But if you don't take care of yourself, you are not a good advocate for any movement. No one wants to listen to someone who is sick, has chronic fatigue syndrome, is deprived. And so for adults in general, I don't think this is a problem necessarily with plant-based diets exclusively, but most adults, I see the way they eat. They don't take care of themselves. They don't make a lot of their food themselves, which is where VitaBowl's is hopefully going to come in and help them with that. But they want everything delivered, Uber Eats, takeout, whatever's quick, whatever's on the go, the healthier fast food that they can find.
Right.
And so because of that, I see people who are destined for nutrient deficiencies and destined not to thrive because they're not planning out their life. We don't have access to the highest quality food anymore. Oranges have significantly less vitamin C than they did a few decades ago. So we all have to think a little bit harder. And so whatever diet someone chooses, it's important. Yes, when you eat animal products, you can get away with it a lot longer without deficiencies, because if you have a very poor gut, absorbing nutrients from plants is a little bit harder than from animals. I'm a big advocate of microbiome programs, basically, to focus on gut health. But yeah, it can be easier. But then we see the long-term health outcomes of really high meat diets, those are not favorable for longevity at all. Those are inversely associated with longevity. So people have to find a way, no matter what, even if maybe you don't have deficiencies, to say, hey, am I putting myself at risk of heart disease later in life if I continue down this path? How can I have more plant foods? How can I have a more balanced diet, either plant-based or omnivorous, whatever someone chooses? But we have a lot of literature on diets that help people to live longer. And so even though, not everyone likes bad news about their bad habits, we do have to look at the evidence and say, okay, we need fiber. Fiber is important. We need antioxidants. So no matter what diet you're eating, you need some antioxidants. And so for me, helping people to either thrive on a plant-based diet or to thrive on an omnivore diet, eating a more plant-forward way of eating, is extremely important.
Gotcha. Let's look back over a couple more questions here just on VitaBowl and generally. How do you navigate, as a startup, kind of quality control, consistency across the different SKUs? How do you guys just make sure that what's being delivered is, the best it can be?
Well, we have a co-packer now, so they have a team that is trained for many, many years in quality control and consistency. All the portions are measured down to the gram, so everything is made the exact same way. All the meals, there's photos of exactly how it should look for the plating, for the assembly. So everything is very, very, very strictly controlled. But first, of course, we're doing that in our own kitchen. So we had to develop that. So we had to have the photos on the wall of this is exactly what it looks like, having all the scales. After a while, if it's the same chefs preparing the food and they're qualified chefs, they will know, okay, 5 grams is this much. They can start to look at it and see. But everything has to be perfectly regimented in the beginning to get that quality control and to get that consistency. And of course, a big part of it was that the team, we get our meals every week and we eat them too, and we make sure that they're all good and they taste the way they're supposed to. So that's the fun part of having a food business.
Yeah, that's cool. How do you think maybe over the next 5 to 10 years that food will become more of a cure to whatever the disease is, right? Instead of it being a pill, do you envision or see potentially doctors start to think, what, let's treat this with the fuel we put in us instead of the chemical that we create for you? Do you see doctors going that route or being open to that more? Or do you still think that that's a whole nother battle? That could probably be a whole nother podcast episode.
I think a lot of doctors are moving in that direction. I think a lot of doctors, I have some friends who are physicians and they actually don't like prescribing handfuls of pills to people. But at the same time, sometimes they will advise someone to go home and to change their diet and to, make whatever necessary lifestyle modifications will get them to this goal of not needing medication. And they come back for a checkup and their labs are all the same. They haven't made the changes. They haven't had the willpower. So hopefully where VitaBowl will come in to fix that problem. But And for that individual, they need to be on this medication. Otherwise, their life will be at risk because they didn't make the lifestyle changes. So partially, yes, it's the messaging and the training of the physicians. There's a lot of physicians who are going and learning this on their own, who are taking lifestyle medicine, nutrition courses, and they're making these suggestions to their patients, but the patients aren't always following. There's some doctors, of course, who will say, well, we don't actually believe that arthritis is connected to diet or that autoimmune is connected to anything that you eat. And there's still, you're going to get different types everywhere you go, but it's in the discussion. And as much as we need to rely on, the gold standard of scientific evidence before we make recommendations, we still see the anecdotal evidence of people reversing their conditions with food, growing and growing and growing and growing, and that's causing people to look at it in a good way. There's also research groups like Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine that are doing these trials, and Dr. Dean Ornish, where they're actually putting people on plant-based diets to reverse their diabetes. And they have these metrics and these are proper clinical trials. And so it's moving, the research is moving in that direction, and that will bring more physicians on board. But in the short term, also, not all the patients are on board. And there's something in the middle too, where I'm seeing a beautiful fusion of the allopathic and, let's say, the food treatment and the lifestyle as well. It's not always just food. It can be high stress. That's a killer. And some doctors are saying, hey, we're going to start you off on this low dose of this. And if you follow all these dietary recommendations, you can get off this drug in this amount of time, and I'll monitor it with you and we'll do it safely. And that's a beautiful thing where we get to fuse all of the advancements in allopathic medicine that have changed and saved lives with also going back to nature and hopefully getting people to not need these drugs.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit just on maybe like what this next year looks like. I know you're out fundraising right now. What's kind of the path for the next let's just say the next year? Kind of what are milestones you guys are trying to hit, and what are some of the goals?
So our biggest goal right now is the insurance coverage for our food. So that's why we're fundraising right now. We're doing our crowdfund because every state, you have to buy into every single insurance company for them to have you, let's say, as somebody who's a payee. So it's a very, very, very arduous process, and it requires a lot of manpower, a lot of paperwork, and also you have to physically buy into the company to be on that list. And so that is our goal. And that is the greatest way to bring this mission to the masses, because this solves the problem of affordability. It solves the problem of inconvenience for a lot of people with having to choose. Do I eat healthy? Do I eat fast? Do I go broke? Like, what do I do? So this is the way to fully actualize our mission. And one of the biggest missions for me as a professional, and also just who I am as a person, to bring this to people is my biggest goal in life. And so the next year is all of us working really hard to make this happen as quickly as possible. And we have this pathway to do it. And we're so excited. And we have the evidence-based protocols for food where we can suggest these things and actually get this insurance coverage. So it's not a far out dream. It's something that we're working, and we're going to make it happen.
That's great. That's great. And what's keeping you up at night when you go to sleep? What are you like? What's the one thing you're like, all right, I'm worried. This is what I worry about all the time.
Oh boy. Have to pick one. I worry that about the affordability of the food system. I worry about the supply chain. I worry about the access to quality food. One of the biggest things I worry about is glyphosate. Glyphosate is, for people that don't know, it's one of the most popular maybe the most popular potent herbicide in the world. It's on all the genetically modified crops. But it's also used as a desiccant by farmers. So farmers who aren't even growing GMO crops, they realize, for example, let's say you're growing lentils or chickpeas or soybeans, and after you harvest, you lose about 20-30% of your crop yield to mold, for example, if there's a little bit damp or whatever. So that's just factored into your business model. You lose about 30%. Now glyphosate comes in and goes, hey, if you spray everything with glyphosate before you harvest it, it won't grow moldy. And all these farmers are like, wait a second, we're going to get to hold on to 20-30% more of our crop just by spraying this toxic chemical all over the food? Sign me up. And the manufacturers are quite sneaky as well, where they say that, oh, it doesn't affect humans because we don't have the synthase pathway and we don't have a cell wall, and it's a different pathway that can't affect humans. But there have been studies that show that over 55% of the beneficial bacteria in the human microbiome are damaged by glyphosate. So what does that mean? What's the microbiome responsible for? Our immune system, our hormones, our sleep and wake cycles, our digestion, our assimilation of nutrients. I could go on and on and on and on. So to say, oh no, but it doesn't affect humans because we don't have this synthase pathway, but ignore the microbiome, which we are our microbiome. We need all these beneficial bacteria to extract nutrients for us, to even drive our cravings, I could go on and on. So for me, glyphosate and what's being sprayed on food is probably one of the biggest crises in the food system right now. And the only way to not support it is to buy organic and to support organic farmers. And organic farmers are not getting the subsidies. They have a tough battle ahead. And there's also a question of affordability, where I don't want to be telling people buy everything organic because not everyone can afford it. So this is what keeps me up at night, is how do we support these farmers without the average person having an unaffordable grocery list? And I mean, ideally, the government subsidies would be in favor of these organic farmers, these farmers that are not using glyphosate. And instead, they're going the other way, saying, well, we need GMO foods to feed the world. And the reality is, where are almost all the GMO foods going? The corn, the wheat, the soy. Almost all of them, or over 80%, are going to these factory farmed animals, where now you have a cow eating a completely unnatural diet. Now this cow has acidosis. The meat is poor quality. Cows are not supposed to eat soybeans and wheat. Cows are supposed to eat grass. But when you're trying to feed this many people this volume of food, something's got to give somewhere. And that's the very abbreviated version of our current food system. And so, what keeps me up at night is how do we shift this? How do we get people to buy organic, if not for any other reason than to avoid glyphosate all over our food?
Wow. It's, it's noon my time here, so I'm going to have lunch after this, and now I'm getting more depressed. Like, what am I going to go? I'm going to go eat something that's probably been sprayed with something. I mean, it's just, how do you avoid it? It's such a huge task, man. But What it is. It's well, kind of where could people go? Where should they, like, if they want to dive into VitaBowl and maybe support the campaign, where should they go? Where should we send people?
Start Engine. So Start Engine VitaBowl campaign is available. Everyone can become an early investor for as little as $200. So this is an opportunity if someone's interested. If you just want to follow more of our mission of what we're doing, VitaBowl.com. And if you want to follow me and learn more about glyphosate and how we're trying to shift the food system and what people can do themselves, lifestyle strategies and interventions, on my Instagram, Sarah Brandow.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to put obviously the links in all the show notes for people to follow. But before we go, I want to talk about anything besides food and completely 180 here. What are you watching right now on the old Netflix, Hulu's? Are you watching these shows right now? Anything catch your fancy?
I actually don't have any of those things, and I don't have a TV in my house. People always comment on this when they come into my house. They're like, "Where's your TV?" Because I set up the living room, and it's a social gathering space. But
Sure.
I don't have any of those things, and I don't watch television.
So no shows right now. You're not watching any shows.
I am not watching any shows. No. Sometimes if someone tells me something's really educational or an interesting documentary or something, then I will watch it.
Yeah.
But no, I live in Tulum, Mexico. I have a very beautiful outdoor lifestyle. So, in Canada, it's a little different. It's dark at 4 p.m. this time of year, maybe 5 now, daylight savings. It's a different lifestyle. So I moved here because I don't feel that gap in my life. I like to go for walks on the beach. I like to walk around the neighborhood, go get a beautiful meal outdoors, meet up with friends, go to evening restorative yoga classes, and just a very, very different life where I don't feel like that's missing. But then I travel other places and I'm like, everyone gets home from work. It's dark. It's cold. There's nothing to do. Maybe you go to the gym and you still have 4 hours left till bedtime. So I see how, in different places, that is a cultural difference that I've adopted by moving here.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. How about podcasts? Do you listen to any podcasts?
So Dr. Furman, I like to listen to his podcast. He created the Nutritarian diet, which is fascinating to me. It basically emphasizes getting the maximum amount of nutrients for the least amount of calories, a nutritarian, which is a really cool way of thinking because it's exactly really what we should be doing, where he'll say something like, okay, well, a lot of oil, you're getting your fat, but you could eat the whole avocado instead of the avocado oil. So I listen to educational podcasts. I find them really fascinating. Huberman Lab, of course, classic. Everyone likes that one. But I wait for specific topics that I like. And my favorite podcast at the moment is The Proof by Simon Hill. That's a fantastic evidence-based podcast where there's recommendations and take-homes at the end of every single episode where you don't feel like, okay, this is too much, this is overwhelming, it's all in layman's terms, and it's empowering. And it's entertaining. So those are the ones that I'm listening to right now.
Awesome. How about books? You read anything right now?
Yeah. So I like to read a lot for work and for education, but I also like to read a lot of sci-fi as well. So I'm reading some Isaac Asimov right now, and I break that up with some health books in between. I just picked up Dr. Michael Greger's new book, so I'm looking forward to reading that one soon. He wrote How Not to Die, actually, and then How Not to Diet. So really cool, funny, humorous takes on nutrition. I'm really into those. But I do mix it up. I like a little bit of sci-fi. You actually create new dendrites, new neural pathways in the brain by reading fiction that you don't get from nonfiction. So actually, it's really important to actually have something where you're fantasizing and picturing things in your mind. It's really good for your neurology in the long term, as opposed to just reading nonfiction, even though you might think day to day you're taking in more info. TV doesn't work like that. Watching sci-fi, watching fantasy, it doesn't necessarily do that to your brain. But reading it does. So read more books, everybody. Cool. Get rid of your TV.
Yeah. Awesome. How about songs? You listen to anything right now? Any albums or any music right now?
I'm very classic with music. So in the evening, I listen to piano when I wind down for bed. I usually like to have circadian rhythm supporting lighting. So I light a lot of candles and I use floor lights in the evening. So I love piano and classical music. And during the day, I love the old school classics, Erykah Badu, Lauryn Hill. That's my rotation most days. And once in a while, if I'm getting pumped up for the gym or something, I'll put on some house music.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, I appreciate you taking time out of your day. Obviously, you guys are in the middle of the campaign, super busy right now. But again, I think this is a really great conversation. I'm going to encourage everybody, make sure you go in the show notes, do some clicking around, go check this out, because really amazing stuff here. So Sarah, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. Awesome. Thanks.